Hey, this is Jason from National Camera Exchange. In this tutorial, we're going to look at the Tone tab in the Lightroom Develop module. This is where you're going to probably make most of your general exposure adjustments to an image. So this is something I use on a lot of images because no matter what, I typically don't get it perfect out of the camera in terms of my shadow values and my highlight values and whatnot like that. So if we start over here in the right hand side, you can see the Tone tab, and I've got exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, and we're going to go through these and kind of show you the effects of those. You can always hit auto, just let Lightroom decide how it looks. It's not a bad idea to just kind of get an idea, especially if you don't have an idea of what direction you want to go on your own. But that's not what I want to do, and I typically don't use auto, but it isn't bad to see what the Lightroom would just kind of guess that you'd want. So a couple different ways to undo what I did. One, in my history panel over here on the left, I can step back one step in my history, and then also on the right here I can or I can hit Command Z. So if I'm up here in that same area of the history, I can do Command Z, Control Z on a PC, and that will step us back one step in our history. So here we'll look at exposure. This picture, a little dark overall, and that's probably fine. The overall exposure is pretty good, but I probably want to adjust it a bit. So in this case, exposure is pretty simple. You can look at it just like what you'd get out of a camera. It runs in, stops. So I can brighten it up by a full stop, or I can darken it. And in this case, I'm just going to brighten it up just a little bit. And then contrast is brightening the highlights or the brighter areas of the image and darkening the shadows or the dark areas of the image. And you kind of see that happen here as I add contrast. My darks get darker, and my sky and my snow is getting brighter. Or as I lower my contrast, it turns kind of muddy, and all of it starts to meld together as my shadows get brighter and my highlights get darker. Most of the time I don't use contrast too heavily. It's a lot of times something I come back to because there's other ways to give you similar effects. So I'll leave it at +11 here. And then the highlights here, that's your near white. So it's the brighter areas of the image, but not pure white areas of the image. So these areas still do have some detail. So if I adjust this, you can see that my sky and my snow, which still isn't pure white, will brighten up. But my pure white areas do tend to grow a little bit if I go up too high, and I get more areas in the pure white. So I'll brighten this up a little bit, and that's going to brighten up my sky and my snow. And then shadows is similar. It's not the pure black where I don't have any data, but it's the darker areas of the image. And in this case, I can brighten those up, or I can darken those. A lot of times I like having some dark areas, but one of my techniques, I like to save some of my shadows, and then in a step just later we'll darken some of my blacks. So I'm going to brighten this up just a little bit. And then whites and blacks, you have to be careful with them because they're areas that don't have any pixel data. So they're so white that there isn't very much data to them, and blacks are the same. They're so dark there isn't any data to them. So as you shift this, more areas of the image are going to become pure white. And you can see I'm losing data in my sky. And the other way to do this, if you hold the Alt button down on both of these two and a lot of other functions in Lightroom, if you hold the Alt button down and then I shift my whites or my blacks, you can see my entire screen goes black. And as I shift it, you can see that the areas where I'm losing pixel data start to show up. And so it's a good way to monitor how much data I'm losing if I make these adjustments. For the most part, this is personal preference, and I want to watch my edit and make sure it's something I like. So I might want to lose, make that pure white, but that's something that you have to just be aware of is happening. And this is kind of brings up the point where you have to be, it's important to have your monitor calibrated, because no matter what I do here, somebody else might not see the same thing if my monitor levels of darks and highlights aren't showing. So it's important to have a calibrated monitor. Otherwise, no matter what I'm going to do here, other people and prints aren't going to show the same thing. So my whites are a little bit too bright. Usually I don't move them heavily. One way to reset them, I can drag it down to 0, or if I double click on whites, then it drops back to 0, and that's for most of the tools here as well. Blacks, again, if I hold Alt down and drag the blacks, then it turns the screen white, and you can see where I start to, if I go darken my blacks, you can see where I start to lose my pixel data again. So that's where areas that are pure black. And if I let go, you can see that gets too dark. So it's a combination there of, where I want to see where I'm losing data, but I also want to visually come back here and set the blacks to an area that I like. And this is where I saved some of my shadows. I brightened up my shadows, and I might drop some of my blacks, so to give me a little more contrast to my image. So that is the tonal panel or tab in Lightroom. Thanks for watching. For more tutorials, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let us know in the comments below what other tutorials you'd like to see. Until next time, I'm Jason with National Camera Exchange.